India and the EU hosted a conference on combating terrorism. This was a two-day regional conference, and the key focus was on the current and emerging threats as far as online radicalization is concerned. There were wide-ranging discussions held on countering online exploitation, and policymakers, academics, law enforcement officials were all in attendance. My colleague Mohammed Ghazali was tracking this closely. Listen into his report.
I'm joined here by Mr. Marco Teixeira. He's the regional representative for the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime for Southeast Asia region. Thanks, Marcos, for talking to us. I just wanted to ask you first that the drug control is a big challenge, not just for India or South Asian region. What are the thrust areas like you have been focusing on since you've been a representative? You're a representative for the United Nations Drugs Office and Crime.
Thank you for the question. Our work with the governments and non-state actors has been focused on different dimensions because drugs and crime are an holistic issues that require integrated actions. One of them is at the legislative side, work with the governments to improve their legal frameworks to address drugs and crime. Another dimension is social awareness, how we educate our young children to mitigate vulnerabilities for them to be in contact with drugs and crime and to take wise decisions on not engaging in crime and drugs. And the third element, to work with institutions, how to investigate, prosecute, and actually collect evidence that leads to successful prosecutions and sentences in aspects linked with drugs and crime. This has been part of our work on the region with the governments of the South Asian countries.
Thanks for introducing that. And what has been the region which you feel in your operations after your research and work that has been instrumental or say the largest contributor for pushing drugs when it comes to South Asia? We have heard of Afghanistan, but what about the other regions we have? Because India has been facing the drug trafficking from Pakistan borders from Bangladesh. So has that also come under discussion with the Indian government?
I think when you look at the statistics of the world drugs production, we see, I would say, in the region, two main hubs. Of course, Afghanistan in the past was one of the biggest source of heroin and opioids. Now this has reduced and may be more fluent in methamphetamines. When you look at Myanmar, became now the big source of opium in the region, associated also with other aspects linked with methamphetamine and other amphetamine-type stimulants. So I think these two elements are part of the source of the drugs that we see in the region, but we see more and more synthetic drugs laboratories producing in the region that have also an impact on the availability of drugs that we see in this region. So it's a collective effort to disrupt this production of drugs in the region.
How big is this a challenge that we have seen multiple reports contributing to the fact that this drug money is also sort of fueling terrorism and militancy across the border of India? You spoke about Myanmar, that's a disturbed region. We know what is happening in Afghanistan or even in Pakistan. So how do you see this drug money being one of the most major contributor towards fueling extremism or militancy across the Indian border?
Financing of terrorism and our analysis comes from different sources. And in fact, the financing that originates from drug trafficking is also one of the facts that's fueling terrorism-affiliated groups and terrorism activities. Naturally, we try to mitigate this to disrupt the illicit financial flows associated with drugs and also mitigate the way they finance terrorism with the counterterrorism financing strategies that are in place in the region and, of course, working with the governments to mitigate their threats.